Chapter 3 Out of the Antarctic. What with the excitement of having the great Admiral Drake speak to him over the radio and his curiosity about the Admiral's message to him, Mr. Popper did not sleep very well that night. He did not see how he could possibly wait for fun or other romance. When morning came, he was almost sorry that he had nowhere to go, no houses to paint, no rooms to paper. It would have helped to pass the time. "Would you like the living room paper over?" he asked Mr. Popper. "I have quite a lot of paper number 88 left over the mayor's house." "I would not," said Mrs. Popper firmly. "The paper on now is plenty good enough. I'm going to the first meeting of the Lady A.M. Missionary Society today, and I don't want any mess around to clean up when I get home." "Very well, my love," said Mr. Popper meekly, and he settled down with his pipe, the globe, and his book of Antarctic adventures. But somehow, as he read each day, he could not keep his mind on the printed words. His thoughts kept straying away to Admiral Drake. What could he have meant by surprise for Mr. Popper? Fortunately for his peace of mind, he did not have so very long to wait. That afternoon, while Mr. Popper was still away at the meeting, and Janie and Bill had not yet come to school, there was a loud ring at the front door. "I suppose it is just the postman. I won't bother to answer it," he said to himself. The bell rang again, a little louder this time. Grumbling to himself, Mr. Popper went to the door. It was not the postman who stood there. It was an expressman with the largest box Mr. Popper had ever seen. "Party by the name of Popper live here?" "That's me." "Well, here's a package that comes Eric's Antarctica. Some journey, I'll say." Mr. Popper signed the receipt and examined the box. It was covered all over with markings. "Unpack it at once," said one. "Keep cool," said another. He noticed that the box was punched here and there with air holes. You can imagine that one had the box inside the house. Mr. Popper lost no time in getting the screwdriver, for by this time, of course, he had guessed that it was the surprise for Admiral Drake. He had succeeded in the outboard and part of packing, with the layer of dry ice, when from the depth of the packing case the sudden heard of paint or his heart stood still. Surely he had heard that sound before at the Drake expedition movies. His hands were trembling so that he could scarcely lift off the rest of the wrapping. There was not the slightest doubt about it. It was a penguin. Mr. Popper was speechless with delight. But the penguin was not speechless. "Ugh!" he said again, and this time it held out the paper and jumped over the packing debris. It was a stout little fellow about 2 feet high. Although it was the size of a small child, it looked much more like a gentleman, with a smooth white waistcoat in front and long black tape dragging a little behind. Its eyes were shining into 2 white sockets, and its black hat. It turned its head from one side to the other, at first with one eye, and the other it examined Mr. Popper. Mr. Popper had read that penguins are extremely curious, and he soon found that this true. For stepping out, the visitor began to inspect the house. Down the hall it went into the bedrooms with the strange Papa's little structure. When it's all Mr. Papa had already begun to think about as he got to the bathroom. He looked around, the pleased expression at his face. Perhaps, thought Mr. Papa, all that white tiling reminds of his eyes and stared at the post. Poor thing, maybe he's thirsty. Careful Mr. Papa began to fill the bathtub with cold water. This was a little difficult because Mr. Bird kept reaching over and trying to bite the fox with a sharp beak. Finally, however, he succeeded in getting the tub out the fill. Since the penguin kept looking over, Mr. Puffer picked it up and dropped it in. The penguin seems not to mind. "Anyway, you're not shy," said Mr. Puffer. "I guess you got sort of used to playing around with those spurs at Paul." When he thought the penguin had had enough of the bath, he drew out the stopper. He was just wondering what to do next when Janie and Bill burst in from school. "Papa!" they shouted together at the bathroom door. "What is it?" "It's a South Pole penguin sent to me by Admiral Drake." "Look," said Bill, "it's marching." The delighted penguin was indeed marching. With little pleased nod of his handsome black head, he was parading up and down the inside of the bathtub. Sometimes he seems to be counting the steps it took. 6 steps for the legs, 2 steps for the width, 6 steps for the leg again, and 2 more with the width. "For such a big bird, he'd take awfully small for a step," said Bill. "And look how his black coat drags behind. It almost looks as if too big for him," said Janie. But the penguin was tired of marching. This time, when it got to the end of the tub, it decided to jump off the slippery curve. Then it turned its outstretched feet first to bogging down on its white stomach. They could see that the flipper, which black on the outside looking sleeves of the petticoats, were white underneath. "Gawk, gawk," said the penguin, trying its new game again and again. "What's his name, Papa?" asked Janie. "Gawk, gawk," said the penguin, sliding down once more on the glass white stomach. "It sounds something like Cook," said Mr. Papa. "Why, that is, of course. We'll call him Cook, Captain Cook."